Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Morgan. I am a senior UX researcher at Bloomberg. It's great to be here at REcon 2018. So today we're going to have some fun with straws. Okay? Seriously. Today I'm going to show you a method of data collection that I've been using over the past few years during mostly early phase prototype testing. And I thought it would be interesting to share it with you all today. So it's something I call visual data collection. Others I've heard it call visual note-taking. So here's the agenda. I'm just going to get my bearings here. I'll briefly talk about the problem we're trying to solve. And I'll give an overview of some of the common note-taking tools and techniques used in the field. And then I'll show you the method details for visual data collection. And then we'll save the best for last, and we're going to do a fun data collection exercise where you'll first watch kind of a play-by-play scripted session using the technique, just so you can get a feel for it. And then you'll be able to try it out yourself. But first, just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I've been working in the IT industry for about 20 years or so. Half that time, I've been working in the field of UX research. And I like to say I kind of backed into the field of UX research, not realizing at the time that what I was doing had a name to it. So I've worked in financial services for most of my career. And kind of moved from an engineering role to closer and closer to the end user. And I've also worked at ADP's Innovation Lab for 4 years or so, doing UX research there for their next generation HCM products. I enjoy writing about the UX research methods as well as talking about UX strategy and innovation. I've got a column on UX Matters called Discovery, which is kind of talking about insights about UX research, which really is its main focus. So anyway, enough about me. Just want to get right into it and talk about the problem we're trying to solve. So we collect lots of data when we do UX research. I mean, why shouldn't we, right? It's our job. Right? We hope to learn something new with each participant or identify a pattern of behavior that may yield some insight, some design implications. Much of what we collect during sessions might be useful and actionable, but does it always align with our initial research goals? We might learn something new. The problem is we don't always know at the time whether or not we may need a piece of data. So what do? We collect it just in case. And then what happens, we start to collect more and more just-in-case data until eventually the deluge of data that we collect may become unwieldy. Then when it comes time to analyze the data, we may end up analyzing things beyond the initial scope of our research goals. With an unlimited amount of time, to do UX research, having more data is not really a bad problem to have. After all, we learn things we did not know before our product and our users. The more data we can collect, the more we can learn about our users, right? But the reality is projects do have limited amounts of time to get things done. Deadlines need to be met so that designers can get their changes to engineers in time before their sprint starts. Researchers need to ensure that they stay focused on the original research goals or risk stakeholder frustration and disengagement. So the note-taking approach I'm going to show you today, bear with me a second, is what I call visual data collection. It allows you to stay focused on your research goals, deliver reporting faster. It'll make your notes more easily traceable in case you need to revisit them. Ultimately, you'll end up with more satisfied stakeholders. But before I show you the method, and we do kind of a fun, interactive note-taking exercise, I want to do a brief review of note-taking tools and approaches that are currently being used in the field. I thought it would be worth just taking a quick survey of what those tools are. So according to UX researcher Whitney Quisenberry, most note-taking techniques have little structure in place. There's the less structured physical tools that we use, like Post-its and notepads and whiteboards. And as you move along this sort of continuum, this line, data contains a little more structure in the guise of spreadsheets like Excel and cloud-based solutions like Airtable. There are solutions that utilize tagging of free-form data like Evernote, or digital brainstorming tools like Mural. And then along the far right, you have what we would call power tools, sort of the waltz, if you will, of note-taking. These are like task loggers, tools like OVO that actually we use here at Bloomberg, and Vivo, which is, I know, used in a lot of qualitative research. It's great for analyzing large amounts of data in lots of different formats. So to collect all this data, we may gravitate towards using our own tools and techniques for note-taking. And I'm sure everyone here has their favorite note-taking tool. So there's no universal manner in which to take notes. According to UX consultant and UX Matters columnist Jim Ross, what note-taking approach we use really depends on factors like the subject matter of your research or the research method being used, among other things. I think the note-taking approach we decide on is usually an afterthought or a given when undertaking a research effort. We already have in our minds the note-taking approach we'd like to use going into those sessions. Ultimately, though, I think the most important thing is the way you record and the way you organize your data should allow you and your teams to ultimately make sense of it. So just a couple of slides on the tools and techniques out there. So techniques to make sense of your data, as suggested by consultancies like Nielsen Norman Group, include things like topical notes, recording observations and coding on Post-its, then affinity mapping them to identify main issues and themes. And then you also have chronological logs, which is kind of a more structured method for taking notes. It involves coding and timestamping of events while logging observations. And then there's something that it's quite similar to kind of the approach I take, which is a path analysis. And it's a more visual method for taking notes. It allows you to analyze the flow a user takes within an experience to identify problems. So we can analyze patterns across all users in a more visual fashion with path analysis. So the visual data collection has a little bit of each of these things going on. It involves recording events and tagging them. And then similar to path analysis, the visuals are really a key part of that process. So what is visual data collection? So here's a definition which kind of sums it up. So really, it's about logging data that includes a visual depiction of the stimuli being tested, which in this case, I've been talking a lot about prototypes, so typically a digital prototype of some kind, or it could even be a paper prototype as well, with corresponding questions and a consistent use of annotations. And those annotations look something like this, and I'll give you more detail around what those are. But here is what those annotations might look like. And I'll walk you through these shortly, what these actually are. So what does it look like when we put these components together? So here is a snapshot of a visual data collection guide for a user study involving a fictional search engine site. I just wanted to keep it simple. And so searching for the latest news on your favorite celebrity is the task. So in this visual data collection guide, you see basically the user flow, the screenshots of the prototype that depict the flow a user would experience, and And this is what you would call the happy path. And here you see the initial search screen and then the ensuing search results. Along the right-hand side are corresponding questions that relate to the visuals, that actually line up with the visuals. So the search results screen questions will line up with the search results section, and then the initial search will line up with the initial search questions. So for easy reference, I put the annotation key for the study along the right-hand side. And so this annotation key is really the kind of the bread and butter of this method. They're basically shorthand symbols, so you can quickly annotate and quickly take notes as you're going through the session. And the key is consistency. If you apply these annotations consistently across participants, you have apples, 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 and everything is much more easy to analyze. So here, for the sake of simplicity, we have 5 annotations. They include a sequence of actions, which is denoted by a square with a number symbol, which would indicate the order in which an action took place. And then there's also a symbol with a U and a circle around it. That might look familiar to you, maybe some of the food you buy. You might see a symbol like that, but it's actually not used for that. This is for understanding or not understanding an element. And then what the participant selected in the prototype is basically depicted by a caret. And then participant feedback or suggestions is depicted by a light bulb. I want to emphasize that I'm making a distinction here between ideas generated by stakeholders versus the ideas generated by your participants. In this case, this is meant to be indicative of participants, but certainly you can create other annotations, and I do have a lot of other annotations that I could share with you that would kind of support some of these ideas. So if we were to interpret this user's data, it appears that they first selected the text field where it says search for something. Looks like they entered in Bruce Willis, and they had. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the last annotation, which is an E. The E basically stands for expectation. So what did the user expect as they're going through the experience? And so here, using a Think Aloud protocol, the user expected that they would have had a list of search results by clicking on the search button. So you see that the order in which they went through the interface, and then you also see a U with a slash through it in front of roll the dice, which basically means that they didn't really understand what that label meant. And then after being told in the session what that meant and what that was, the participant suggested calling the button something else. And so this is using the annotation for an idea or suggestion. So this is just basically a brief walkthrough of what this looks like. So, all right, so we have, imagine you've logged all your data. You've collected all this data into their respective guides. So let's say you've got 3 participants and you've used the annotations consistently across all the participants. Now you've kind of put them together into one guide so you can analyze them for patterns and themes. So since we consistently applied them, analyzing them presumably should be easier. So here is what this tally sheet looks like. And I'll walk you through this. So it's basically, the tally sheet is basically your master document, includes all of the data, and the responses for each of the questions and annotations will include the participant's number. So you see P1 is participant 1, and then it's denoted with a circle. You also see what this does is this allows you to kind of establish traceability. So when you have more questions about what participant 1 did, you can go back to their guide and you can reference it and you can trace back what they did. There's also these lines here too. These we call connectors. So the connectors can include, there's multiple ways that I'm using connectors here. One is you include the participant to the response, as indicated by those two participants not understanding what roll the dice meant. And then there's also, as indicated by this blue arrow here, you have participant to participant connectors, which suggest that there's a similar behavior. There's a pattern here between the actions taken, the first action here by all of these participants, because they're all connected. And then lastly, we have the participant to action sequence. So in this case, the first participant's second action was to click on the search button. So with this very basic example, you could see how it becomes really easy to analyze this data. So it's not without its challenges. As you can imagine, I mean, every method has some kind of challenge associated with it. I want to acknowledge that they do exist, and these are some of the ones that I came up with. So websites that have many ways to accomplish the same task become difficult to design data collection guides for. The number of predefined responses could just become overwhelming. I mean, there might be so many different ways to entry points into a task. How can you account for all of that? So rather than crafting questions with predefined responses, it might be worth considering leaving open-ended questions and then documenting that path explicitly. Another challenge is real estate. As you have more and more participants, space within the tally sheet just becomes a challenge. Typically, I've used this method successfully for up to around 10 participants. Beyond that, the increasing density, it becomes really hard to discern. And then lastly, subject matter without a UI may not benefit from a method like this. How would you articulate something that doesn't have a UI and then take notes on it? It's an interesting concept to explore. Perhaps as a metaphor you can use to depict what that is. So questions which are more exploratory in nature, they also might require further detail, transcription, and coding, things like that. So this method may not be the best. So now it's time to watch it in action. So hopefully I can get this working. So pay attention because you're going to be trying this out in a minute. You should have guides, hopefully. Awesome. OK, cool. So we're going to do this in two parts. First, you're going to actually watch the annotations in kind of a scripted play-by-play mode alongside the screen share of the prototype. So you're going to see the screen share of the prototype. You're going to hear the participant and a moderator. And then you're going to see the annotation guide and then the actual data collection on the other side. And so for the first half, you don't need to you could just watch it. You don't need to actually do it. And then the second half, you're gonna try it out. So let me read the scenario first and walk you through the happy path, just so that you have a sense of what to expect. As a note taker going into a session, usually you have an idea of what the happy path is, right? So here's the scenario. So the product and design team for a meal ordering website called Meal Pilot is interested in conducting some UX research with potential customers using an early phase prototype. Participants are asked to complete the following task. Today's Thursday, order a sushi meal for Friday's lunch. Pick it up between 1:15 and 1:30. So I'm going to walk you through the happy path, and then I'll play the video. All right. Ta-da! Actually, I have it right here. Anyway, all right, so here we go. Here's the path. So I'm coming in here. I want to order my sushi meal. I want to reserve it for Friday. I want to pick it up between 1:15 and 1:30. So I'm going to search. And let's say I work at Bloomberg. And then I'm going to select Midtown East. Oh, there it is. There's my sushi. I'm going to click reserve and choose my time. I'm going to select it, schedule it, And now my lunch has been scheduled. And now I have my order code, which is a secret code that you use when you go pick up your lunch, although you all know my secret code now. So, and that's it. And then I'm going to click Roger that. And now I have to get back to work. So, but I'm already working. All right, so let me play the video. Do you want to play the video? So this is a very early prototype, so some links may or may not work. What's important for me to know is what you'd expect as you go through the prototype. Imagine you want to order your lunch from this website called Meal Pilot. The site allows you to order your meal in advance, and then you have to go pick it up yourself. It's Thursday afternoon, and you can order your Friday meal now. You think you'll be in the mood for sushi, and you'd like to pick up your meal up between 1:15 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. Show me how to do that. Assume you're already logged into the site and are a paying member.
Well, the first thing I do is search for sushi in the search box over here. Oh, I see I didn't see the text in the box. It says search by location. Yeah, but you know, I would have assumed it was defaulting to my work location already. So, assuming I entered in my work zip code, I would click on 10022 Midtown East. What's this? Whatever. What does that mean? Is that a mistake or a glitch with the site? Looks like some kind of error.
So actually, this is intended to be your surprise meal. You order it, but don't know what it is. Is this something you would consider ordering?
No, definitely not. It's too uncertain. What if I get something I hate or am allergic to? What I would love to see is to have a few possible choices and then have a whatever that narrows it down to those choices. Then at least I'll know I'll get something I'll like and am not allergic to, and will still have some element of surprise.
All right, so now at your table are handouts and pens. So what I'd like you to do is, I'm just gonna pull up this. So use the annotation key when recording your observations. Observe the participants' actions and the sequences. Use the annotation guide. Try to answer as many questions as you can. And watch for what they do and do not understand, and then answer the question. So let me replay the video, play the next second half of the video. So let me bring back up. All right. Can we get the video up on the screen? Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, here we go. What would you do at this point?
I click here on sushi rolls and miso soup because I want to know what kind of sushi they're offering, how many rolls I get, and how big the soup is.
So you want more information about what you're ordering?
Yes. Usually I would click here and expect to see some sort of description.
Okay. So what would you do at this point?
Then hit reserve here. And he says choose your pickup time. So this is kind of weird. Well, it's not as easy. I have to figure out what military time is. So this, it's a military time. I expect it to say something like, 1:15 to 1:30 p.m. A lot of times you see military time when you travel abroad, but not so much, here in New York City. And then I guess I'll click on schedule pickup. And then this is kind of strange. These look like movie tickets, and I'm not ordering movie tickets. I'm ordering a meal, so I would expect to see some sort of, food picture here or something, but not, movie tickets. And then this says your meal pilot order code is doppelganger. So I wouldn't expect there to be a word there. I'd expect some sort of code like, letters and numbers together, like ABC 1 2 3, J5.
Why is that?
Usually, when you order things, they give you some random code of numbers and letters so that nobody else can, know what your code is and take your order by accident. I guess then I'll click on this. And your order is in, so get back to work. That seems kind of bossy. I don't know, some people might be offended by that. And then this is kind of weird. There are headphones here, so, I'm not ordering music or ordering a record player or something. I'm ordering a meal, so this is kind of weird to have headphones here.
All right. So great. So, so now that you've experienced it, kind of, maybe the person next to you, maybe pair off and just compare your results. Everyone takes notes differently, and now you're trying a approach that should be consistent across participants, across people taking it. So, walk through each other's notes, see if you captured similar things. Try to see if there's any similar things, similar findings. What's different about them? $15 minutes? Oh. nicely.
Like, where do you use this?
Sure.
Like in the example that we saw.
Yeah. So, as an example, so the first action, physical action, she took was to go here, and maybe she put text in here, right? So she had to select the text box to put information in. So that would be, click. Hello? Mike? Yeah. Okay. We're gonna ask for volunteers to share their experience. Anyone want to share their experience using this? They could think about what they liked, what they didn't like. Anyone? Anyone?
For me, the idea was great. I feel like every team probably can build their own and make it easier. The one thing that bothered me specifically is that it's very difficult to listen, follow what she's doing, have the visual annotations and text. So most teams, you have some person that is guiding to think aloud and some person that is taking notes. It would have been easier if we had two people that do the notes as well, just one text, one the actual flow, and uses the annotation.
Yeah, no, that's excellent feedback. I think over there.
So you actually touched upon this a little bit on your challenges slide, which is like multiple happy paths. And I really like this method though, first of all, because it's like shorthand, you can write a lot faster. And when you go back, it's very easy to like recognize the symbols. But what if you're working on something that isn't a linear path and you have branching? Like, is there a way to adapt this tool like even a little bit to that, or is it fairly like rigid and limited to a linear pathway?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, I think I'm running into that challenge now actually with some research I'm working on and collecting notes. And when you have so many permutations and so much branching, the best way to do it, I see, is to give yourself enough space, blank space, and articulate the branching through just writing the path, almost like a breadcrumb, you know, with labels and arrows and sequence and order them. And really that's, I think, the best way, because it's just so hard to, it's like trying to boil the ocean, you know, it's just not possible. So why even try it? Yeah.
Do you ever actually go back and like look at the recording and then do the visual note taking on the second round when you're reviewing, or?
I do. In fact, there was just a subset of annotations. I'm happy to share more. I actually have a lot more annotations than that. One of the annotations I have is an asterisk, which is just to review video. Because it's like, the reality is you're not going to be able to collect everything. To your point earlier, it's like, you're doing like, you're moderating, you're taking notes, your attention is so divided. So if you can kind of, get what you need, if you're on a small team and you are the moderator and the note taker, which in my previous, where I worked prior to Bloomberg, I was that person. You really had to be economical with your data collection and speed and things like that. So it's I acknowledge the challenge. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Anyone on this side of the room? You guys are too quiet. Sorry, I wasn't like walking around. Anyone else? Oh, sorry, didn't see you.
Hi.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Just noticing the.
Okay, I'll go later then.
Where? Oh, I'm sorry. You
She
want to
can
do
go-
rock,
she
paper,
can go
scissors?
first.
Or sorry, you go.
Okay, yeah. So it's a good way to make the annotations. I've seen other fields like scientists, when they have a research notebook, they also have their own symbols to write faster.
Yeah.
And like the other person mentioned, it's like really hard. It's kind of like when you're doing this on the go, it's kind of hard to distinguish like expectations versus what the person is actually thinking about. So you have to be like very like practice it a lot and be experienced to do that. So yeah, I mean, not much of a question, but just comment.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great comment, and I have annotations that are like anecdote. So when a person is talking about, oh yeah, I used something like this, a couple years ago when I was doing this and that, like anecdote, like you want to note, those are important things to collect in your research, right? Those are stories, they tell about the use of something. So being able to like categorize on the fly experiences, and annotations kind of allow you to do that. So, sorry, you were next.
So I think overall it's an interesting concept. It's like Seamless and Grubhub. But one thing I noticed is that you had the option to put in your zip code or your location, choose whether you wanted grilled cheese or sushi and soup, but there was no restaurant selection in the user flow. There was no, okay, I want sushi and soup, but from where? What restaurants are in my area? What are the options? What are the costs?
Right.
Didn't see any of that,
Yeah.
unless that was intentional. But
It was intentional to keep it simple.
Okay.
It's an early phase prototype, and there was no rhyme or reason to, whether or not I would have that. It was just a means to convey a method. But certainly, that's something that would come out of research to say, hey, what's the name of the restaurant? Like, I should be seeing that on the page. So yeah.
And
But this was just to convey the method.
we also thought that the idea with the whatever and the okay, you ordered, get back to work. I think it was kind of an attempt to humanize and make friendly the experience, but I think it was taken as like, oh please, maybe cheesy with the whatever, because it was a little vague, and then like someone like the respondent said, oh yeah, get back to work, because it seemed kind of bossy and rude. even though it was trying to be cheeky, I'm assuming.
Right, exactly. So in there, I was just sort of testing out the tone of the language used in the website. So yeah, a lot of people. Randy? Oh. And then I have a few more minutes. I have one more slide.
So in your work, can you speak to how big a vocabulary of annotations you have
Sure.
and your process of adding or tweaking what those are as you kind of do different projects?
Absolutely. So what I do is it all just comes back to what am I trying to find out? What are my goals? What are my research goals? And then based on my research goals, I try to figure out what are the annotations that are going to prove most useful to me to support these goals. So if I'm looking for, feedback, opportunities to improve the experience of a meal ordering website, I will probably use, annotations like understanding, not understanding. I'll probably ask some questions around, tell me about a time when you used this, a website like this, what was it like? And then in that case, I might use an anecdote annotation, and then I can tag it accordingly. So depending on what my goals are, I'll have, maybe anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen annotations that I'll use, and I'll pick them out before, just so I have them written out, because even though I use them a lot and I tend to remember them, I don't always remember them. I mean, sometimes you forget. So one more question, and then I've got one final thought. Yep.
How do these questions get updated throughout different tests that you do? The questions that are on the right column, and then how do those tie into your own research questions? Like, does this person have a past experience with something similar like this? And then, I guess the third part is how do you take all this information and put it into a spreadsheet or some sort of analysis?
Sure. So the questions will always tie back to what I'm trying to learn. So always tying back to the goals and objectives of the study. So if in this case for Meal Pilot, this fictional website I made up, if I'm trying to find out, well, what is the typical, what are the kinds of things that people want to order on the website? I'll have on the right-hand column questions around, well, what's the first thing they search for? Is it food? How are they searching? What's their search approach? Maybe that's a question I might ask. And I will have questions, maybe predefined answers. They search by location or they search by food. Learn about what their needs are when it comes to an experience like this. I'll take all that information. So it's open-ended, it's closed, and then as I was showing before, the tally sheet, I'll put it all together in the tally sheet, and because the data is kind of lined up alongside, you can easily analyze it because it's lined up together. Spreadsheets are great. I definitely use them in, traditional, kind of exploratory research. But for studies like this, where you have a prototype and a stimulus, it's really useful to have that kind of inline, insights and data next to what you're actually testing and what people are seeing. It's almost like just a timeline of everything that's going on. It's like a film, almost like like that. So I just have one more slide, which is just a couple of final thoughts. Here it is, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight potential areas of using this method. So it's proven useful for like early phase prototypes, but is there maybe a way to use this for, summative studies, like usability testing, perhaps, something that I'm trying to get a feel for myself right now. And how about products that don't have a UI, which we were kind of talking about before? How would this method capture notes without any screenshots? Can you come up with a metaphor for, conversational UIs that you could depict in a script? So these are things to explore. And lastly, I just want to talk about, like, I call it sustainable research, like literally sustainable. Like, I've been using digital tools like pencils and tablets to collect the data because I realized over so many years that I was printing out so much paper, and I'm like, my God, this sucks. Like, why do I need to kill so many trees? So I just started using my iPad and a tablet. It's amazing how much paper you could save. I still have to kill a little bit of a tree because I have a tally sheet which I have to print out to aggregate all my data, because it's just much easier to look at all that information and aggregate it when you have it physically in front of you, rather than having to swipe back and forth between PDFs on a tablet. So anyway, that's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.